episode. All right. Everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. We're kind of seeing a underpinning here. Stability and movement and mobility is very important. Okay? Here's the things we want to look at. There neurophysical properties that impact movement, various components of stability and mobility training, 5 primary patterns of movement training and how they are addressed in movement training phase. Okay? Okay? Today's decreasing levels of activity, man, it's worse than ever. And commonplace poor posture lead to muscle imbalances. Here's the latest one over the last couple years. Okay? This session focused on the need to reestablish stability and mobility across the joints, as well as how to train the 5 basic movement patterns. Okay? Bend and lift movements, very important. Squatting, single leg movements, single-legged stance and lunging. Pushing movement, primarily in the vertical and horizontal planes. Pulling movements, again, primarily in the vertical and horizontal planes. And rotational or spiral movements. So what they're referring to here, gang, really is what? ADLs, activities of daily life, and how to enhance them through the training. Okay? Movement, of course, improving clients' movement efficiency and ability to perform daily activities is one of the many possible definitions of functional training, of course, within our scope of practice as well. Ability to move efficiently requires the appropriate levels of both stability and mobility. Joint stability, ability to maintain or control joint movement or position. Joint stability rather. Joint mobility, range of uninhibited movement around a joint or body segment. Remember, gang, not stated here, but in practice, if you have joint hypermobility, that can be an immediate contraindication to many stretching regimes, okay? So a joint that's moving well beyond what it's designed to do, knees especially, be aware of that. If somebody has hypermobile joints, you need to be careful with that, okay? Movement efficiency involves a synergistic approach between stability and mobility. The ACE quote here, proximal stability promotes distal mobility, okay? Remember, if we're determining a landmark on a joint, okay? Proximal, distal, if we're talking about the humerus, right? The landmarks on a bone, go back to the saying there. Proximal stability promotes distal mobility, okay? The relationship between stability and mobility throughout the kinetic chain is complex. Gave you a couple handouts regarding now, Angel? Oh, Angel, can I ask you a question? Again, everybody knows Angel, so.
Hi, Angel.
Yep. Was there a couple in earlier that were inquiring about a membership? The guy had the kind of granny glasses like I do?
Oh, is it the one with tattoos?
I can't remember if he
Is it
was
Kim?
tatted up. Did
Yep.
they have inquiries or?
Asking about the dance, you signed up for something.
Asking about a couple-
Oh, they were wondering where the dance class was?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Makisha. Did you direct them to room 120?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the room wasn't, the door wasn't open.
Okay.
Yeah.
They could just have a seat out in the hallway, they'll start. Good job.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Angel, you have a good night.
You too.
Bye, Angel.
Bye.
Okay, and as I said, the relationship between stability and mobility throughout the kinetic chain is complex. Gave you a couple of handouts regarding that. The first one seemed to be the better of the two. Okay. Mobility and stability of the kinetic chain. While all joints demonstrate varying levels of stability and mobility, they tend to favor one over the other depending on their function. For example, when the lumbar spine demonstrates some mobility and is generally stable, protecting the low back from injury. On the other hand, the thoracic spine is designed to be more mobile and facilitate a variety of movements in the upper extremity. Okay? The foot is unique as its level of stability varies during the gait cycle. Okay, glenohumeral joint mobility, scapulothoracic stability, thoracic spine mobility, lumbar spine stability, hip mobility. Notice what I said earlier, gang, this is not always apparent. Knee favors stability, as I said. Joint hypermobility in the knee, look out, especially if you're trying to put somebody through plyometric movements. Not indicated. Ankle mobility, foot stability. Why I mention that is that's not frequently noted. So you have to have a look at all the joints. Okay? Joint's kind of a hinge, the knee's kind of a hinge, but it doesn't like going high degrees either lateral or medial. We all get that. Okay? That's why there's so many accidents and injuries in the sports realm with knees. I'm living proof. When mobility is compromised, the following movement compensations can occur. The joint will seek to achieve the desired range of motion by incorporating movement into another plane. Adjacent, more stable joints may need to compromise some degree of stability to facilitate the level of mobility needed. Okay? A prime example of this is an injury when somebody develops a limp, like Nick. Now, Nick's gait has improved even with a few short weeks. His shuffle is actually turned now more into a labored walk. So if somebody saw Nick for the first time, they'd think his gait's terrible. But from what it was, it's fabulous, it's phenomenal, okay? We take small victories when we can get them, okay? Lack of mobility. The lack of mobility can be attributed to reduced levels of activity and conditions that promote muscle imbalance. Loss of mobility leads to compensation in movement and potential loss to stability at subsequent joints. Muscle imbalances ultimately contribute to dysfunctional movement, as illustrated next. Remember, lack of mobility can become for many reasons, okay? One, of course, the deconditioning, people leaving the realm of activity, or injury, or some kind of medical condition like a stroke, for instance. So lack of mobility isn't due to laziness, okay? That's the first and most readily available explanation, but not necessarily. Frequently, yes, but certainly not always the case. Dysfunctional movement, okay? My running gait is horrible. I freely admit that. So, my compensation for the sore knee and the multiple surgeries leads to my gait being very unusual. It's not uncommon. If any of you know me and see me, people come by and sometimes go, "Sir, are you all right?" And I'll go, "Yeah, I'm fine. This is just the way I run." Not efficient anymore at all. It's kind of a loping gait. People that know me, they can spot me in a crowd of runners. And I'm not saying that because I'm proud of it, it's just the way it is. So I've had a lot of compensation because of all the injuries from the pelvis on down. In every surgery, it seems to get worse. Of note, if you get the chance to work with somebody that's had some catastrophic injuries, they're going to tell you something that probably sounds a little bizarre. My last knee surgery, when I started actually wearing shoes again, they felt like they belonged to someone else. Any of you, like, women do it more than men, but ever switch clothes with somebody or wear somebody different shoes? How bizarre they feel? That happened to me. Because I had all kinds of different things. I had broken bones and torn ligaments and tendons. Okay? So, looking at this slide, muscle imbalance attributed to many things. Okay? Remember? Repetitive motion. Somebody working in a hospital might have muscle imbalance. Side dominance. Awkward positions or postures. Gang. Psst. Work environment, side dominance, another common one. And all the rest of these things alter muscle physiological and neurological properties, okay? Compromises the mobility-stability relationship. Compromises are largest at subsequent joints, proximal and distal. Okay, terms we need to know. Humerus, proximal, distal, okay? Demonstrates continued effects along the kinetic chain. Things keep going and working their way down, okay? The body subscribes to the law of facilitation. It achieves the desired movement following the path of least resistance. Okay? Dysfunctional movement develops faulty neural pathways and strategies. Inevitable breakdowns, usually at the weakest link. Okay? Let's take Nick for example. I'm gonna take him out and make him go run 5K for a warm-up?
I'm not.
No. But if we did, the kinetic chain would probably break around where all the deformity had occurred. Like I said, that's nice of him though to show you what it looks like. Again, man suffered through a lot of things, but he didn't say no. It took over 20 years to get him into a gym, but he's here now. Isn't that cool? 20 years worth of work. So when my cars were working really good last summer and I didn't see him, guess what? He called me. Hey Zach, I think I want to do something. Bingo, we got him back. Excellent. And again, not a plug for him, but his shop does really nice work at a reasonable rate. It's called Keystone Auto. But again, nice work at a reasonable rate. Movement compensations, they generally represent an ability to maintain muscle balance and neutrality at the joint. Again, all the rage with core, trying to achieve a neutral spine. Okay? Likewise, we want neutrality at the joints. Periods of inactivity when joints are held passively in shortened positions result in muscle shortening. This is abundantly clear, on an airplane, right? You hear about the people getting some kind, what was that syndrome, Nathan? Help me out. Phlebitis or something from a transatlantic flights and so on? This can happen. Muscle shortening and lengthening alter both the physiological and neural properties within the muscle. I'm not saying don't go and take a nice trip, but usually on super long flights, if there's no turbulence, the flight attendants will let you walk around a little bit. I've been on some doozies going across the Pacific. Hell, the pilot came out and had a beer, not with me, I was drinking a beer standing up by the rear gallery. I talked to the pilot through 2 beers. He needed to stand up too. I always ask him, hey, is anybody up there flying the plane? But again, getting up and walking if you can is a great help, okay? Length tension relationships. Length tension relationships is the relationship between the contractile proteins of a sarcomere and their force generating capacity. We touched on that earlier when we were in our A&P segment in our first book. A slight stretching of the sarcomere beyond its normal resting length increases its force generating capacity, as illustrated next. Stretching of the sarcomere beyond optimal length reduces the potential for contractile protein binding. Shortening the sarcomere beyond resting length results in an overlap of contractile proteins. Okay? Anyways, this is all good in, on a slide and so forth. Just remember that the length tension relationship will change depending on what muscle tension is, to help you to remember. And again, don't get too wrapped up in this, but it's nice. It's a nice thing to exemplify though. Force couple relationships, back to our old hip now, okay? Discussed over here on this side of the board earlier. Muscles rarely work in isolation, but instead function as integrated groups, okay? We had the force coupling and muscle coupling mentioned over here. Many function by providing opposing directional or collateral pulls at joints, termed force couples. For example, maintenance of a neutral pelvic position is achieved via opposing force couples between four major muscle groups. Again, we have the pelvis illustrated here. Okay? Rectus abdominis, hip flexors, hamstrings, posterior surface of the pelvis, and the erector spinae. So what you're seeing here, gang, it's not very bright, but the pelvis is being illustrated as this. Does everybody see that? Okay. So, again, a lot of times you can see problems in doing some movement screens and identify some problems very quickly. Now, well, let's pick on men for a minute. You see sometimes you see people with obesity with like the rolls, kind of looks like a caterpillar. And then sometimes you'll see like the solid mass that doesn't have any rolls. Very different. Well, more weight that's out here sometimes can cause the pelvis to tilt, okay? What the people don't realize is you still got to train abs, but what else would also require attention immediately?
Back.
Exactly, erector spinae. So why we have the pelvis here, as I mentioned before, it's not for me to carry around during lecture and look interesting. It gets a lot of use in our discussion. So when you're studying, you don't have a pelvis model with you necessarily, but get yourself in the picture. So if again, some of you are visual learners, put yourself in the position with the book so you can see what it's trying to illustrate. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I do that sometimes. Okay, neural control, my apology. Joint movement is dependent on nerve activity. To help stabilize and control movement within the joint, some degree of simultaneous co-contraction of the antagonist also occurs, okay? When a muscle becomes shortened, increased tonicity occurs within the muscle. Hypertonicity. A hypertonic muscle requires a smaller, weaker nerve impulse to activate a contraction, sometimes known as the lowered irritability threshold. When an individual tries to activate the antagonist at a joint, the reduced irritability threshold of the agonist may prematurely activate the muscle and inhibit the action of the antagonist. Okay? That's a long term to swallow, right? Let's see. A little bit better example. That hypertonic muscle decreases the neural drive to the opposing muscle via reciprocal action. On the prior slide, gang, remember, more often than not, you can't have co-contraction on an agonist and an antagonist at the same time, okay? Now for posture though, okay, if I'm trying to increase my posture, I'm trying to remain erect, I am getting a little bit of rectus abdominis and erector spinae. But again, if I bend forward like this, okay, rectus abdominis has to be activated and erector spinae have to be relaxed, right? Agonist and antagonistic movement.
Everybody has a different flexibility.
Oh, of course.
Ability, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So,
By blueprint, no, but by lifestyle and or some congenital factors and lifestyle factors,
but
yes.
not by blueprint. So they should be.
We
able
should,
to touch their
if that
toes.
baby comes out right, the factors should be almost equal.
Yeah.
But again,
I agree.
pardon?
I agree.
Yes, but again,
You gotta work at it.
mhm. Yeah, you gotta work at it in a bad way to mess that up, but lifestyle change or repetitive movements and so forth all contribute to that going south.
So if you can't do it, you should work towards it.
Yes, absolutely, unless there's some detriment, you know, of course, like an injury or something of that nature, but
Right.
always, we need to work for neutrality if we're trying to do service for our client, yeah.
A lot of the guys at the department, because flexibility is one of our categories for testing, they say, well, I can't, you know, I have bad genetics, so I can't test me until whatever.
BS.
That's what they did at the office, I kinda asked around, I
No,
was
you-
surprised.
It's
Now
because they're
that-
so tight that they have to work at loosening them. Like my brother, he's 6'7", and he was out in the academy out in Wyoming for BIA, and that's one thing he failed his flexibility test. So his training officer, that's what they did for 2 hours every day before PT. It was just, he would work on stretching them out, and you gotta keep at it, because if you stop, you just revert back to your non-elastic
Absolutely.
self.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and again, injury can greatly inhibit that. Before, I tore both rotator cuffs, I could join my hands behind my back. Now if I do it, I have to have an appliance to do so. So I have to hang a washcloth over my back, grab it with my other hand, and inch myself manually to it. I can't just arbitrarily grab my hands behind my back.
So is there
Everybody do that?
is there no way for you to get that dexterity back?
I get it fixed. I got too much scar tissue in there. So I want to keep muscle memory, as it were, though. That's why I use an appliance in the form of a rag. Anybody touch their hands behind their back?
Like this?
Just like that.
Yeah.
Can you go both ways, Anna?
Probably not.
Okay?
Nope.
Okay. Go ahead, Makisha. Yep.
Right?
Both ways. Yep. Did you make it? Okay.
my separated shoulder, and that's what
Yep.
I'm doing it.
And again, can I ask you how old you are, Makisha?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Never had a bad injury?
No.
Isn't youth great?
Alcohol will contribute to that later in life.
So anyways, yeah, talent, if we ever did some training, like I said, I like to see how flexible, how good somebody's flexibility is. One thing, if they do go on some kind of a diet for weight loss, it usually tends to help it a little bit. Not much, but just a little bit with the flexibility, okay? But you're already lean enough where it'd probably be negligible. You're carrying your height weight proportionate, everybody in the room is, so that's good. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable if you do have somebody that's morbidly obese in the room and everybody isn't, you know. I gotta have a different conversation, as it were. Okay, so hypertonic muscles decrease the neural drive to the opposing muscle via reciprocal action. Reciprocal inhibition of the opposing muscle contributes to further weakening of the antagonist. All right? Again, this stuff's a little bit hard to swallow. This reduces its ability to generate adequate levels of force to move the joint. When other muscles of the joint, the synergist, assume the responsibility of becoming the prime mover, it's called synergistic dominance. Compromised joint movement alters neuromuscular control and function. Okay, here's the thing, gang. Synergistic dominance, when people are doing back work, for instance, and their form's terrible in a lat pull down, they're forming up at a 45-degree angle, backward lean, and then they're pulling the weight down with some movement, okay? The synergist then, the bicep, becomes the prime mover. That's the clearest example I can give there. And that makes sense to everybody, doesn't it? That's an easy one. Okay. So in phase one here, stability and mobility training, the objective of the phase is to reestablish appropriate levels of stability and mobility throughout the kinetic chain. Following the principle of proximal stability promotes distal mobility. And again, depending on your client, you might not get a whole ways farther than phase one, okay? Now, Nick doesn't mind us talking about it, like I said, we're helping him out, okay? He's not gonna like Martha for a while, okay? But he realizes what a blessing it is to get somebody with her knowledge base, so Martha volunteered for that. Martha will be training Nick free just because she wants to, one, keep in practice and get back closer to the resistance aspect of the training, and two, Nick's going to benefit greatly from it. He's gonna look like a cat under that car real soon, okay? And again, this figure, okay, illustrates a programming sequence to promote stability and mobility within the body. Okay, and remember, the spine has 3 basic curves to it. We all know that. Again, if it hasn't been injured or compromised, okay, proximal stability in the lumbar spine, core function, okay, isolated activation of core musculature in the lumbar spine. That device that Martha mentioned, the Pilates reformer, anybody seen one of those? It's kind of like a table with, not unlike what a chiropractor might have, but anyway, it has different bands on it longitudinally. Again, somebody that's good with Pilates can take a subject and start recruiting different core muscles, and you'll see pain immediately. Not their intent to create pain, but to show, once you feel the pain, then that's the muscle that they know now that has to be recruited, helping with the feedback chain, okay? Proximal mobility, the pelvis and the thoracic spine. Mobilize the pelvis and thoracic spine in all 3 planes without a loss of lumbar stabilization. Okay, proximal stability in the scapulothoracic spine, okay? Or proximal mobility for the glenohumeral spine. When you see these things, those 2 terms, you know we're in the shoulder area, okay? Promote stability within the scapulothoracic region and the glenohumeral mobility once thoracic mobility is restored. Distal mobility and stability. Promote distal mobility and stability within the extremities, arms and legs. Static balance. Okay, Tamla was talking to me about that a little bit last night. Sectional or segmentational stabilization. So what you were showing on the ball and so forth, Tamla, excellent, advanced, not for a beginner obviously, but probably when you're on the ball and so forth, that'd be segmental stabilization. Okay?
What were you doing on the ball?
Oh, yeah.
Missed it off.
Oh, God, we had so much fun
You're
last
gonna
night.
have to pay for it?
She did somersaults on medicine ball.
Yeah.
I can do a squat on a medicine ball.
Nice.
It's, as I said, it's beautiful, because, well, Tam was asking me about my training in that. Again, I humbly said very little, but I gained some training in a correspondence course for my continuing education credit called Fall Proof. In the old days, it was called Fall Down. And again, it's full of many different drills and so forth. One for people that should have regular mobility that don't due to deconditioning, and then also compromised mobility due to injury or injury or the congenital effects, stroke victims, and the like of it. Very nice. But anyways, I'll get her the author of that and so forth, if that's an interest to you. And again, if you've got someone with greatly compromised mobility, you gotta think small and small victories before you go on to bigger victories too. And proprioception's different than actual movement training. The proprioception is the person's awareness of where they are in the space as well. So you can do a lot of different things, and if somebody doesn't know what you're doing, they'll think you're crazy or goofy or something. For instance, I was working with an 88-year-old elderly client. Her name was Wilma, and she was just awesome. And I thought she was doing fabulous, but she wanted to increase her proprioception, so divided attention drills moving through space. So frequently, you'll see people marching that aren't used to marching. And I'll be singing a song, or she'll be singing a song, then marching with something out in front of her, like holding a book. Then marching, holding the book, and reading it while you're going down the hallway and so forth. So task loading appropriate to the client. Okay, so anyways, getting back to stabilizers and prime movers, okay, we know what those are, I hope by now. Muscles that act primarily as stabilizers generally contain greater concentrations of type 1 muscle fibers, okay? Type 1 and type 2, remember those? Okay. Type 1 muscle fibers enhance the stabilizer's muscle capacity for endurance. Remember, think the Kenyan, the marathoner, probably a higher degree of type 1s in their physique. These muscles are better suited for endurance type training. Okay, we get that. Muscles primarily responsible for joint movement and generating larger forces generally contain greater concentrations of type 2. These muscles are better suited for strength and power type training. Okay, quads, definitely think, what, type 2s.
Mm-hmm.
Stretching techniques. Much of this phase is devoted to improving muscle flexibility. In some cases, gang, it's very, very poor. Okay? Passive elongations of tightened muscles is generally needed to impose the appropriate overload to begin the morphological process of adding sarcomeres back into the muscle. Okay? We spoke of sarcomeres earlier. Okay, the personal trainer model provides specific guidelines on passive elongation. The application of different stretching modalities is effective in restoring and maintaining good posture and muscle balance. Okay, got another kind of flow chart here, gang. Okay, stretching technique template. Pre-exercise, during exercise, post-exercise, all right? Now with Nick tonight even. I said, Nick, can we get back on the elliptical a little bit? Well, he had to go pick up a client. So at least I know I have him parked well away by design. So he would be getting a cool down, not necessarily a stretch, but better cool down, at least to get him back to a state of non-activity.
Stretching before a run. Yes or no?
Oh, we spoke, okay, let's get it out, gang. Okay,
sorry.
I can't take it in. I wish Todd was here, but I could talk about it again.
I asked him before class.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get it
Wait,
out.
did I forget something?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Not at all.
I'm sure I have, though.
Okay, are we ready? I get this out. It's in small print, so I'm gonna hold it out to here. Okay, another one of the ACSM Mythbusters. This was in Sports Illustrated. They had a nice segment on sports medicine. Mythbuster number 7, stretch before running. Okay, are you taping me right now, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Untape me. Untape me. I said Chris was